Fallout 76 in 2021 finds itself in a pretty weird or really interesting spot overall. A couple of months ago, we saw a large-scale update come to the game, this adding in a ton of quality of life improvements and honestly being one of the game's best updates to date. And now in a follow-up a few months later, we have an even larger update on the horizon that Bethesda just posted to their public test server. So in this video, I want to document some of the changes that are coming to the game, both as far as some of this content that is live, but also in terms of data mines that can be found in the files. But even further, answer that question as to whether or not this is the time for you to come back to the game. Is this the update that's going to get you interested again? As well as actually go over the horizon of Fallout 76, as the rest of 2020 is looking really interesting and kind of curious for this game. And I want to talk about what we know thus far and where things could be heading. So when looking at these new features, it is worth considering this is based off the public test server build. As such, of course, this stuff is subject to change. It's still a month away before this update goes live to the public. Although most of the time we don't see a ton of changes to stuff on the public test server outside of bug fixing and some minor tweaks here or there. Either way, one of the first things that is coming are special loadouts. And this is definitely one of those features that probably should have been added a long time ago and feels right at home in Fallout 76. Basically, the way this will work is you'll now be able to build a new punch card machine in your camp or actually find one of those machines at a train station. At this new machine, you'll be able to edit and create a new special loadout for your character. And this is actually pretty big. Right now there are 2 slots, the existing one and one new one that is basically a blank slate for you to freely assign special points to, as well as fill up with all of your various perk cards that you have already unlocked. One of the reasons this is so huge is the ability to just freely move around your special points. That was one of the biggest barriers to entry with trying or customizing your build in the past. In the live version of the game right now, before this update is posted, if I wanted to switch builds, it would take a considerable level investment. Because for each special point you wanted to switch around, it would require 1 level up as a cost. That is just no longer a thing. That feature has been completely removed, and now you can just move and reassign special points whenever you want at this punch card machine. And then like you could previously, you can populate this and switch around perks on the fly also. So although this does give you way larger customization over your existing build, it also allows you a second slot to just create a totally different build of whatever you want. You can reuse your perk cards in that separate build and just quickly return to a punch a card machine and actually switch builds from one to the other. And this honestly just feels really nice in Fallout 76. There are a couple of super meta builds, whether it be Junkies, Bloodied, or some of the other tankier or stealth-based builds. And although they sounded cool and fun, I basically never wanted to try them out because it would require a ton of perk points. And then if I hated the build, it would require a bunch of additional perk points to revert things back to where I wanted them to begin with. This removes all of that, allowing you to dynamically and very quickly switch in between builds or just tweak your existing build, allowing me to try some stuff out that I never have before. I for one haven't looked up optimal builds for Fallout 76 in years. I've been using the same build for a very long time with minor tweaks, and this actually got me interested in that aspect of the game again. It's definitely not perfect. You still have things like mutations that are a factor. You might want to cure yourself of some mutations for a certain build where it might hinder you to have a mutation but be beneficial on a different build. Also, legendary perks are still totally separate, so you'd swap legendary perks on the fly, but certain legendary perks you may have to change and won't necessarily mesh super well with one build or another. And one of the other big issues is there are only 2 slots available at launch. In the past, as Bethesda has been discussing this stuff, they mentioned looking into additional ways for players to unlock additional slots. One of the potential ways being on the Atomic Shop. So I'm going to assume if you want a 3rd, 4th, or 5th slot, you'll have to buy that for atoms, which honestly just makes Fallout 76 feel like some free-to-play game. But in general, these special loadouts are long overdue, but a very nice and exciting feature to the game. I for one would love to see a ton of other balance changes go live with this. There's a bunch of legendaries in the game that aren't that useful. Buff them up and change up the meta a bit. Give us some other powerful builds to try out that were typically irrelevant. In a very similar vein, now you can also have multiple camps on a map at a time. Similar to the special loadouts, there are only 2 available right now. I'm going to assume more will be purchasable for atoms in the future, perhaps as a part of the battle pass. And the way this works is, now as you open up the menu of the game, you'll be able to activate a second camp. which will basically despawn your old camp and then spawn in the camp you just activated. This is pretty cool because they are location specific, which is a huge plus with this. It's not like you have to place it down each time. You'll just have all of the stuff around you disappear, and wherever your other camp is located will populate with that camp as you activate it. So now I'm not hugely into building. My one camp is definitely more than enough for me, but a lot of people are. A lot of people make these really pretty camps in specific locations of the map, but sometimes you run into an issue where you have such a cool camp that took you so many hours in one specific spot, you probably wouldn't want to try something else because you're going to have to totally tear that all down. This gives those builders an opportunity for something new and unique, and how easy and quickly you could actually switch between them on the fly is also really cool. And although the camp slots themselves are just a great addition to the game, there's actually a lot of extras that come with this that make camps even a bit more appealing overall. You can now change the name or icon of a camp, and this not only applies for you internally, but publicly on the world. So as you scan the map, you'll see all kinds of new icons with clear indications and labels for whether or not they have a shelter down in addition to a vendor at their camp. And vendors got a big update also, as now vendors are connected. Previously, if you wanted max vendor slots, you would have to put down 4, but now one vending machine will have access to all of the slots. And even further, let's say you put down a new camp, you activate your second camp and throw down a vendor there, it'll automatically populate with all of the various things you have for sale. It's not like you're going to have to restock or reset everything for sale at each camp you do create. This makes browsing as a user just way more convenient, but also it is a really nice quality of life feature for those actually selling things. You can make the vendors or little shops in game a lot more condensed or have a lot more freedom with how you build them, only requiring one vendor now. You also can now place vendors inside of shelters and display cases inside of shelters also. These are some of the big critiques of shelters on release, in particular with displays. So getting this feature there now is a huge upgrade. And really in this one, it's just more good content. Even if you're not a builder like I'm not, you're gonna have more people doing more creative things. That beautiful camp you walk past, now that person can build a second one and just switch in between them on the fly. Likely they'll be able to set down several of these once you're able to actually purchase or unlock several slots at a time. And it's going to probably make shelters even a more powerful tool for these camp builders. And some of them have already done some pretty amazing things with them. But then one of the other really big features going live with this update are more additions to daily ops. As what's getting added is a new game mode, new mutations for the enemies, new enemy types, and even some new maps to play daily ops on. And all this is added to the rotation. So when a daily op pops up, it'll be one of the 2 game modes, and also all of those other factors are now added into the overall pool, making even more combinations, which will hopefully make the whole thing feel a lot fresher over the long term. This new game mode is basically built to be the polar opposite of the other game mode. In the other game mode, you basically hold down certain locations for a long time while waves of enemies come to fight you. It's more beneficial to kind of be tanky. You can't use stealth in that mode, as that's the permanent mutation of the game mode. Conversely, in this one, you want to use stealth, and stealth is enabled. And basically the theme of this one is super simple. The permanent mutation that will always pop up is enemies have armor piercing. So enemies will deal a ton of damage to you. They have near 100% armor pen. So it's basically like you're not wearing any armor. And what your job will be is to hunt down and kill a certain number of enemies. And this is very much so hunting them down. There's no quest markers. You're going to be running around the map trying to find enemies. There'll be less overall, but as long as you find one and take them down, it'll count as a kill. After this, you'll have to kill a specific enemy who is holding a code. This will have a quest marker, so you'll track them down, take them down, and grab their code. Then you get this hypothetical code. You use it to decrypt some device. You basically just have to go somewhere and hold the E button for a short while. And then you repeat this whole process 2 more times, 3 times in total. But each time you decrypt the device, the enemies actually get stronger. They will deal more damage to you with each subsequent wave. So when you're on that final wave, you have to kill more enemies, but also they will hit you harder than ever before. And then finally, after doing the same thing 3 times, at the end there is a boss fight, and this boss is a massive bullet sponge. The boss seems to only have 50% armor penetration, but they take a long time to kill, a lot longer than the bosses in the other mode. And basically the functional gameplay of this one, as you're seeing in the background, is a lot of running around and looking for enemies. But when you find them, they hurt really badly. So that's kind of where the stealth comes in. It's kind of a weird dynamic in that you're meant to be way more mobile, but also stealth is sometimes super viable, especially sneak builds. If you're using a crit or sneak based build, you can do a lot of damage and clear this extremely quickly. There's been a lot of people arguing back and forth that this mode is way harder, this mode is way easier. If you have an even remotely coordinated team, this this is super easy. I actually think it's harder to do solo because, of course, you have to find things. You don't have quest markers. You're running around. So having good teammates does make this go a lot quicker compared to the other mode where you can do it solo relatively easily. I overall think it's actually a nice change up. This can definitely be harder at times, but really easy if you have the right people with you and depending on what their builds are. But it is definitely meant to be more stealth focused. Some people are trying to play this the exact same way they play the other game mode, and that really will lead to some more negative results, I would say. In addition to this new game mode, which is the biggest thing, we also got 3 new mutations. An important point of clarification, these mutations will apply to both game modes. Although right now in the PTS, only the new stuff is running, so only the new mutations and only the new enemies, the old enemies and the old game mode will also get these mutations from time to time. One of them makes it so enemies run faster. This kind of felt gimmicky. It'll probably be more effective on the other game mode, but we haven't experienced that yet. A second one makes it so when enemies die, they explode into a toxic cloud. This can be bad if you have no poison resistance, but honestly, it wasn't a huge issue to me. And then one where enemies and groups heal each other. And although the new mutations are okay, I actually love the new enemy types that are added in with this. It's going to be the Scorched, Mothman Cultists, and Mole Miners, but it just feels like they have a lot more variety. Like with the Scorched, you will not only get the Scorched, but also sometimes some Scorched creatures, like a Scorched Cricket. Or with the Mothman Cultists, you have the Cultists themselves, but also occasionally a little Mothman will pop up and you'll have to fight them. And then finally the new locations with Vault 96, the Watoga Civic Center, and West Tech Research. This is another one that feels like a great addition to Daily Ops. I'm really happy this is finally here. Honestly, I kind of wish this was added at the end of last year, 3-4 months ago. It would have kept Daily Ops feeling fresh, but better late than never. Whenever new stuff like this is added, people are always complaining that things are too hard or they don't want to change up their playstyle. But the new game mode to me is a lot of fun, and I think making daily ops a bit harder or giving additional rewards for beating them even faster, upping the challenge, should be something they add at some point. If anything, at points, depending on the map you have, this game mode with decryption can be almost too easy. And I wouldn't be super upset if they did nerf it in some ways. Again, it really depends on your build composition, but if you have a good stealth ranged build or even just play with a couple of people with decent stealth ranged builds, you can clear through this no problem. To sweeten the deal, some new rewards were added to Daily Ops also. Here's a full list. I'm not going to go into each of them specifically, but some of the notable ones: you get a plantable pumpkin crop. So if you do want to get into the Halloween spirit this March or April, hey, more power to you. The Covert Scout Armor Plan. So this is going to be 5 armor pieces plus a mask, and basically this is this new unique armor that'll give you improved stealth in dark areas. Hypothetically, really useful on the new Daily Ops mode. The way this will work is by doing the Daily Ops, you can get the plans for each of these. They're not tradable, and what the plan will do is give you the ability to craft a regular version or get a legendary version from a drop or the legendary purveyor. So it's going to be a serious grind like the Brotherhood of Steel armor we had in the past. And the Wendigo Tube plan is another pretty notable one that is tradable and actually looks pretty cool. Now, unfortunately, there are a ton of plans added in with this that will definitely dilute the pool a bit, making it so if you're really after one of those old rare rewards, it might take a bit longer now as you'll be earning some of these new plans. Definitely gives you a bit more incentive to grind those out before this update goes live. A couple of other smaller changes going live with this. There's now actually crafting sliders, which, although small, is massive for this game. So if you have the ability to craft duplicates of an item, now as you go to craft it, a slider will pop up and you can easily max this out or do something in between. We get an update to aim assist. So if you're using a controller on PC, you can test this. Basically, there'll be different degrees of aim assist for controller users only, and it's actually going to change depending on the weapon you are using. Like you can see for my flamer here, it's not as hard. It doesn't pull the gun as hard as it does with, let's say, a pistol, where it's probably the most extreme out of the ones I was testing. The Season 4 scoreboard is live in game with a ton of new rewards on it. Season 4 goes live on April 27th when this update goes live, which makes Season 3 extremely long. Some of the cool rewards you can get, though, are things like mannequins or a power armor display case. These are huge. I'm sure people will be all over this. Unfortunately, they're actually somewhat deep into the system overall, mannequins being at rank 24. So you're going to actually have to do at least some of the grind if you want to unlock this content, or wait even longer for it to pop up in the Atomic Shop, as this stuff typically does. The Commissioner Chaos Power armor with a fully digital head is a pretty cool or interesting one. This has spawned a very well-balanced and well-articulated discussion on the lore friendliness of some of the stuff that pops up in the season system, because apparently this was the one thing that crossed the line, making people feel some of the cosmetics are too unimmersive. And 2 new consumables are coming that are pretty cool. Sugar-free Nuka Shine, giving you the benefits of Nuka Shine without the blackouts and teleporting, and Rad Ant Wee Heavy, which is going to give you plus 50 carry weight for 30 minutes. Also, this hot tub is coming to the Atomic Shop. You'll actually be able to use it and sit in it, which is pretty awesome. Unfortunately, this was not a bug-free PTS, and although I normally don't cover most of these bugs, some are worth mentioning. There's basically been a change to how on-hit damage is applied. There's a great post on the forum right now that I'll have linked down below with a better description, but this seems to be affecting things like the Friendly Fire perk, the Thorn armor that many people have grinded to unlock, or even the Vampire legendary effect. And it seems like this is both a bug, but potentially not a full bug. So right now it's a full nerf or things aren't working appropriately, and that should be fixed. But what they actually did was make an intentional change to how on-hit effects were applied. So even if you only shot once, you could have multiple on-hit effects apply, where after this, if you shoot once, it would only apply 1 on-hit effect. So basically 1 on-hit effect per bullet, where previously it could be multiple per bullet. That's a rough explanation. We don't really know where things are going here. We'll find out in the next update, and that was confirmed by community manager, that this will be fixed. So we'll see what parts are intended and which aren't intended, or maybe the whole thing will just get reverted. There's some discussion on legendary power armor getting updates, and although technically true, this is likely not because legendary power armor is getting added, but rather to track down people that have legendary power armor to ban them. So if you've seen discussion on that, it's not something to get super excited for, at least thus far. It does not seem like this is something coming in the next update. And honestly, that's really it. It definitely seems like the golden age of data mines is behind us. Bethesda now clearly uses separate builds, so the PTS doesn't give us a look ahead several months into the future as it did previously, or perhaps even a full year into the future like we saw with some of that Wastelander stuff. With that said though, I think Fallout 76 finds itself in a really weird spot right now. This update is another one that's really good. This is great content that, although I think is long overdue, probably should have been added last year, for whatever reason it wasn't, and thankfully it is finally coming, and I think these are really healthy additions to the game. This is all super solid content, more quality of life improvements, and really opening up more avenues to experience Fallout 76 for the players. With that said, I don't think it's worth returning for. Unless you love grinding for somewhat pointless cosmetics, there's no real selling point, at least for me. The daily ops stuff is definitely fun, but I don't want to just log in every day to grind daily ops just so I could get a new skin or a new armor, and that's it. That's the whole reward. And I would say this kind of finds itself in a similar spot with that January update, in that these are 2 updates that are fairly large scale, adding in great stuff to the game that'll be amazing to experience when we get another big content update, another big quest line added. So you can hear the good news that Fallout 76 is still getting really solid updates, but again, I don't think this is the one to return for. I think that could hopefully be the next one, which, speaking of, it is now this very curious situation as to where is part 2 of Steel Dawn. Steel Dawn itself came out a while ago now, all the way back in November. When it came out, it was only 3 hours in length. It was really short, not much content at all. And honestly, since Wastelanders, Fallout 76 overall has gotten very little content, and we're now approaching almost a year since Wastelanders came out. This update is still over a month away, and at their current rate of updates once every 2 to 3 months, hypothetically the big content update might not be until summer. We might not hear about what the next big content drop is until E3. It's a really weird spot for Fallout 76 right now. There has been such a content drought, despite the fact that we're getting amazing quality of life fixes and even some critical bug fixes along the way. Now, on one hand, I imagine the Microsoft buyout could affect this. I don't know if it will directly or even soon, but to me, I could realistically see one of 2 major things happening. Fallout 76 kind of continues down this almost free-to-play-esque path, but the big thing to get added is custom servers and mod support. So they still can monetize the game with their cosmetics, their battle pass, etc. But on the flip side, some of that new content can kind of be picked up by the community, because at its current rate, there is just not enough new content coming to this game to keep me interested. Right now, I only really want to play once or twice a year, or alternatively, I could see additional and further investment into this game and we start getting more regular content updates, even just on the scale of ESO. The Elder Scrolls Online has definitely been thriving. That content looks amazing, and I really do hope we see a similar treatment with Fallout 76, but honestly, I could see it going going either way, opening up the floodgates to a ton of custom content and trying to monetize around that, or additional investment behind the scenes. And the reason I think one of these two things will happen is I imagine Microsoft wants to keep the Fallout IP monetized. Unless they have some spin-off or a remake up their sleeve, Fallout 76 right now is the only way they are making money off the Fallout IP, outside of Fallout Shelter, and it doesn't really feel like they're doing that good of a job, or at least Bethesda hasn't been over the past year. I feel like Fallout 76 could be a way bigger game. The potential is definitely there, and it's definitely not meeting it. ESO has done a great job in this decade-long gap in between Elder Scrolls games, and I think Fallout 76 can fill a similar role in what will likely be a decade-plus gap in between Fallout games. So now, of course, this is all speculation. I think over the next couple of months, and especially as we approach E3, we'll know a lot more. Do we get a roadmap before E3? If it is something big on the horizon, I imagine saving it for E3 could be pretty lucrative. Either way, though, that's where Fallout 76 stands right now. It's a really interesting or odd spot where there just hasn't been much content. There have been updates that are really good, but still not something really worth re-downloading for. Hopefully you guys found this one informative, your bi-monthly status update of where Fallout 76 stands. And if you hear anything new, I will definitely keep you up to date. But with that said, I thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all later.